This lesson will show you how to determine the cost of inventory under the perpetual inventory system using the LIFO cost method. Under LIFO, the last units purchased are assumed to be the first units sold to customers. When LIFO is used in a perpetual inventory system, the cost assigned to the units sold is the cost of the most recent purchases. Companies that produce non-perishable items like petroleum, metals, and chemicals usually use LIFO. Landscape supply companies are a good example of a company that would use the LIFO method. When a landscape supply company replenishes its products, such as mulch and stone, they pour the new mulch and new stone on top of the old materials that were previously purchased. When a customer buys mulch or stone from the landscaping company, the customer's orders are pulled from the top of the mulch and stone pile, which would be the materials last purchased or the most recently purchased items by the landscape supply company. In recent years, LIFO has become more widely used because it can reduce net income, thus reducing the amount of taxes the company owes. Let's walk through an example using the inventory information that's provided in the chart for item 127B. We will review the process of recording each transaction based on the LIFO costing method. Let's first review the inventory record report used to record the transactions. The basic format of the inventory record report does not change depending on the costing method used. It will always include 10 columns. The first column is used to record the date of each transaction. The next three columns, 2, 3, and 4, are used to record the quantity, unit cost, and total cost of the inventory purchased. The middle three columns, 5, 6, and 7, are used to record the quantity, unit cost, and total cost of the inventory sold or the cost of merchandise sold. The last three columns, 8, 9, and 10, are used to calculate the quantity, unit cost, and total cost of the remaining inventory balance. Now we'll walk through entering the transactions from the inventory chart into the inventory record report using LIFO. On January 1st, there is an opening inventory balance of 1,000 units with a $20 per unit cost. Since these units are carried forward from the previous period, we do not enter anything in the 3 purchase columns or the 3 cost of merchandise sold columns. The opening balance is entered in the last 3 columns where the remaining inventory balances are tracked. In the first row, the date column, enter January 1st. In the first row of the last 3 columns titled Inventory, enter $1,000 in the quantity column and enter $20 in the top row of the unit cost column. And then calculate the total cost of the opening inventory by multiplying the 1,000 units by the $20 per unit cost, which should be $20,000. The total cost of $20,000 must be entered in the very last column. In the first row of the date column, enter January 1st. In the first row of the last 3 columns, titled Inventory, enter 1,000 in the quantity column, enter $20 in the top row of the unit cost column, and then calculate the total cost of the opening inventory by multiplying the 1,000 units by the $20 per unit cost, which should be $20,000. The total cost of $20,000 must then be entered in the very last column. On January 4th, the company sold 700 units at a selling price of $30 per unit. Whenever the company sells inventory, the transaction is tracked in the cost of merchandise sold columns. The first step is to enter the transaction date of January 4th in the date column. At this time, the only inventory we have available to sell is the opening inventory. So these units will be used to fill the order. The second step is to enter 700, which is the number of units sold, in the quantity column in the cost of goods sold section. The next step is to enter $20 in the unit cost column in the cost of goods sold section. The unit cost of the 700 units should be $20 because this is the per unit cost of the 1,000 units we have in stock. Now we need to calculate the total cost of the units sold by multiplying 700 units by $20, which should be $14,000. The $14,000 must be entered in the total cost column of the cost of merchandise sold section. When completing the inventory record, a common mistake students make is entering the unit selling price, not the unit cost or unit purchase price. In the January 4th transaction, do not use the selling price of $30 per unit as the unit cost. The $30 unit price is actually the selling price that the units were sold for, which represents revenue, not cost. The last step is to determine how much inventory is left after the 700 units are sold and enter the balance in the last 3 columns of the report, which is the inventory section. Calculate the number of units remaining by subtracting 700 from 1,000, which is 300 units. Enter the 300 units in the quantity column and the $20 in the unit cost column of the inventory section. The $20 unit cost is used because that is the unit cost of the opening balance of the 1,000 units. The last step is to calculate the total cost of the remaining units by simply multiplying 300 by $20, which should be $6,000. Enter $6,000 in the total cost column of the inventory section. On January 10th, the company purchased 500 units at a cost of $22.40 per unit. Just like the other transactions, the first step is to enter the January 10th date in the date column. The second step is to enter 500 in the quantity column and $22.40 in the unit cost column of the purchases section of the report. The next step is to calculate the total cost of the units sold by multiplying 500 by $22.40, which is $11,200. Enter this amount in the total cost column in the purchases section. The final step is to update the last 3 columns to reflect the new inventory balances. First, bring down the 300 units that are left over from the beginning inventory by entering 300 in the quantity column and $20 in the unit cost column, and then $6,000 in the total cost column. The last step is to carry the new units over to the inventory section of the report. Go to the inventory columns and enter 500 in the quantity column, $22.40 in the unit cost column, and $11,000 in the total cost column. This step is important because the inventory columns must show the number of units and the cost of the units that remain in inventory. It's important that you do not add the 500 units and the 300 units together. They must be listed separately because they were purchased on different days and at different unit costs. Let's look at one more transaction. On January 22nd, the company sold 360 units at a selling price of $30 per unit. As always, the first step is to enter January 22nd in the date column. Since we have 2 different groups of inventory in stock, we need to determine which group of inventory we will use first to fill this order. Since we are using the LIFO method, last in, first out, we need to use the 500 units that were purchased last to fill the order. Go to the cost of merchandise sold columns and enter 300 in the quantity column and $22.40 in the unit cost column. Calculate the total cost of the units sold by multiplying 360 by $22.40, which should be $8,064. Enter $8,064 in the total cost column in the cost of merchandise sold section. The unit cost of the 300 units is $22.40 because this is how much the units were when the company purchased them. Do not use the selling price of $30 per unit because the selling price is used to calculate revenue, not total cost. The last step is to update the last 3 columns of the report to reflect the remaining inventory balances after the customer's order is filled. Prior to the sale, the inventory balance was made up of 300 units at $20 per unit and 500 units at $22.40 per unit. The oldest units in inventory are the 300 units at $20 per unit. This information needs to be dropped down in the inventory section first by entering 300 in the quantity column, $20 in the unit cost column, and $6,000 in the total cost column. Now we need to determine how many of the 500 units purchased on January 10th are left after we filled the order of 360 units. We simply subtract 360 from 500, which should be 140 units. Now in the inventory section of the report, enter 140 in the quantity column, $22.40 in the unit cost column, and then $3,136 in the total cost column. In summary, after the order of 360 units is filled, the company's inventory balance is made up of 300 units at a cost of $20 per unit and 140 units at a cost of $22.40 per unit. Please walk through the rest of the transactions for this problem to ensure you fully understand the process of completing the inventory record report using the LIFO method. The problem can be found on page 278 in the book.